Matthew chapter 25, verse 40, which says, things done to the Lord's servants are done to the Lord, so ministry to the needs of the saints shows love for God's name.
Yes. Benevolence is a good work. It is something that must be done, and it must be done in faith. When you think about James chapter 2, you show me your faith without works. You can't do it, right? Faith without works is what? Dead. So we show our faith through our works. My focus on this question was more in the tense of the verbs. What you have done and do. They weren't resting on the past. They weren't just satisfied with what had already been accomplished and we're not going to do anything else. No, it's a continual benevolence. It's a continual working within the kingdom. Think about Galatians chapter 6, verse 9, as well as 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 58. Galatians 6:9 says, let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. Don't give up. God is just. He's not going to forget the good things that you have done and continue to do. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 58, therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. If you have done something 10, 20, 30 years ago, and you are living off the fruits of that work, but you're not continuing to work, you're disobeying 1 Corinthians 15:58. Always abounding. We must continue working. As long as we've got breath in our lungs, we have to continue working. The encouragement is this. You can sum it up. You have done well. Keep doing it. Don't stop. Any other comments on chapter 6 before we move on? All right, Hebrews chapter 7. We're going to see the superiority of Jesus as our high priest over Melchizedek. So let's get in with our reading review questions. Question number 1. Melchizedek is king of blank. Salem. King of righteousness and king of peace. We see that in verses 1 and 2. Salem, righteousness, and peace. Question number 2. What did Abraham give Melchizedek? A tenth of all the spoils. And it's real interesting if you get into that. That's a tenth off the top of the spoils, the very best. He didn't give him any leftovers. He gave him the very best of the spoils from those wars that he had just been involved with. All right, fill in the blanks on number 3. Now, beyond all contradiction, the lesser is blessed by the better. The lesser is blessed by the better. Number 4, the change of priesthood necessitated a change in what? The law. A change in the law. Number 5, what did Moses speak of Judah concerning priesthood? Nothing. He didn't say a single word about Judah and the priesthood, did he? He was silent about that. That's going to play a part in one of our discussion questions. All right, number 6. Jesus' high priesthood came on the power of what? An endless life. All right, number 7. What happened to the former commandment? Say again. It was annulled. It was annulled. Okay, number 8. Jesus has become a surety of what? A better covenant. That word better is so important. As we go through the book of Hebrews, we see everything about Jesus is better than what was. All right, number 9. What 5 words or phrases are used to describe our high priest in chapter 7, verse 26? Holy, harmless, undefiled, separate from sinners, higher than the heavens. All right. And then finally, number 10, fill in the blanks. For the law appoints as high priests men who have weaknesses, but the word of the oath which came after the law appoints the Son who has been perfected forever. All right, any questions, anything that we need to talk about in the reading review? If we went too fast, we need to go back and talk about one of them again. All right, discussion questions. Number 1, identify Old Testament citations and references in Hebrews chapter 7.
Verse 1, Genesis chapter 14, verses 18 to 20. Verse 5, verse 2, Numbers 18, 21 to 26, 2 Chronicles 31, 4. Verse 6, Genesis 14, 19 to 20. Verse 14, Genesis 49, 8 to 10, Numbers 24, 17. Isaiah 1, 1, Micah 5, 2. Verse 17, Psalm 124. Verse 19, Lamentations 3:57. Verse 21, Psalm 124. And verse 27, Leviticus 9:7 and 16.
Okay, you got a lot more than I did. I think you got everything I did, but a lot more there. So the ones that I got, Melchizedek. Every time he talks about Melchizedek, go back to Genesis 14. All right? He's referring back to that situation. 3 verses in Genesis chapter 14 talk about this man Melchizedek. And then you've got in chapter 7, verse 5, talking about the tithes and how the people gave the tithes to the priests of Levi. Numbers chapter 18, verse 21 is the specific verse, but there's a context there. Behold, I have given the children of Levi all the tithes in Israel as an inheritance in return for the work which they perform, the work of the tabernacle of meeting. You also had something from Chronicles on that one. 2 Chronicles 31:4. Also talking about the tithes, I assume, in that context. Twice he quotes from Psalm 110 in verse 4, in verses 17 and 21. And then chapter 7, verse 27. We have, who does not need daily as those high priests to offer up sacrifices, first for his own sins and then for the people's. For this he did once for all when he offered up himself. He's talking about the old covenant, the way that the priests had to continually offer those sacrifices. We have Leviticus chapter 9 and verse 7. Moses said to Aaron, go to the altar, offer your sin offering and your burnt offering, make atonement for yourself and for the people. Offer the offering of the people and make atonement for them as the Lord commanded. Also chapter 16 and verse 6. Aaron shall offer the bull as sin offering, which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his house. So, anybody have any others that are not on the screen and that Robin did not mention? Okay, if you want to fill in more, see Robin after class. He'll tell you all the rest of them that he's got. Because he got, like I said, he got more than I did this time. All right, number 2. In what ways did Melchizedek serve as a type of Christ? A priestly king. How many kings in Judah also served as a priest? 0. Now, some of them attempted to do some things that they shouldn't have done, beginning with Saul, and we see it again happening later on, trying to offer sacrifices that they were not authorized to do. But those who legitimately served as both king and priest, 0. So that's a good one. They both served Melchizedek and Christ as a priest and king. What else?
And priest forever.
Okay. Priest forever.
Like the Son of God, he was King of righteousness and the priest, just like Christ. You mentioned king and priest.
Yes.
He received tithes from Abraham, like Christ received gifts from those who love him. He blessed Abraham, like Christ blesses us. And the priesthood served the Gentiles and the Jews.
Yeah.
Everything.
Right. So we've got a number of things here. King of Righteousness, chapter 7, verses 1 and 2. Talks about Melchizedek as King of Righteousness. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 21 talks about how our righteousness comes from Jesus. Okay? The next one is that he was righteous among the heathen. He was a priest to the Gentiles, like he said. And Jesus, when he came and dwelt in the flesh, he remained righteous despite mingling with sinners. He didn't participate in their sinful activities. We see in verse 26, he's separate from sinners. And yet, remember in the gospel accounts, a number of times, why are you eating with sinners? And of course, the answer was he came to seek and to save that which was lost. He was trying to restore sinners to a proper relationship with God. And so he was righteous among the sinners. Both greater than Abraham. The lesser is blessed by the better. Abraham was blessed by Melchizedek. And then we also see that Jesus was greater than Abraham in John chapter 8. Abraham rejoiced to see my day. Even though he's dead, before Abraham was, I am, right? He was and is greater than Abraham. Non-Levitical priests. Melchizedek couldn't be from the tribe of Levi because Levi hadn't even been born yet. He was a Gentile. He wasn't a Jew. Jesus was from the tribe of Judah, so neither were Levitical priests. King of peace. King of peace, and then Jesus was the Prince of Peace. He brought peace with God. There's no record of descent, birth, or death for Melchizedek. Now, we do have a record of Jesus' birth in the fleshly instance, but he is eternal, so there's no record of his beginning. He has no beginning. And as an eternal divine being, he has no end either. And his priesthood will continue forevermore. And then, as you mentioned, Melchizedek received tithes from Abraham, and Jesus receives our gifts today. Any others on the types of Melchizedek and antitype of Christ? All right. Question 3. Last week we went over time. This week we might go under time. Question number 3. Discuss the law of tithing in the Old Testament and the principles regarding giving today.
No law required $10 that they had to give back to the Lord. That's animal, birds, drops, falls, everything.
Right.
And like you said, on top, the best. New law, we can say 2 Corinthians 9, verse 7. Where we give to the purpose of our lives, and blessing the necessity of God was to give. So, the Old Testament as our guide and give. Why should we give less than what they did in the Old Testament? We should at least equal that or greater.
Yeah.
To me, you have the purpose in your heart, based on what you.
Right. Right. What else? It was to support the priests in the Old Covenant. Yeah. They didn't have a land inheritance, the Levites didn't. And so there was a support system set up by God to help those who were of the Levitical tribe, to help them in the work that they were assigned. So the chief spoils, the spoils of war that Abraham gave, that's in line with the principle that the best belongs to God. The Jewish sacrifices were commanded to be without blemish. The great King David was motivated by the principle that it would be wrong to offer to God something that cost him nothing. 2 Samuel chapter 24, verse 24. The existence of the tithe as it pertains to the worship of God is therefore in this place established as antecedent to Judaism. When was the law of tithing given? The law of Moses, right? When did Abraham live in relation to Moses? It's not a trick question. Who do you read about first in the Bible, Abraham or Moses? Abraham. Abraham was before the law of Moses was given. And so this principle of tithing predates the law of Moses. Abraham's gift to Melchizedek does not make tithing a command for the New Testament church. However, the faithful Christian, having received life and been set free from the bondage of sin, will offer a weekly offering to God. We are commanded to lay by and store. No specific percentage or amount is given. The Christian is to give a portion of what he has prospered. 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 2. Tithing is not specifically taught in the New Testament. After the gospel accounts, Jesus does talk about it in relation to the Jews, but that law has been done away with. He said that the Jews should have given their tithes without neglecting other parts of the law, Matthew 23:23. New Testament Christians were commended for their sacrificial giving. In 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 1 through 5, Paul talks about the churches of Macedonia. They were in deep poverty, and yet they exceeded in liberality in the gifts that they were sending to the needy saints. Now, can we infer from these passages that tithing was an acceptable percentage for the New Testament Christians? God's principles of obedience have never changed. Tithing, the very word means giving a tenth. The tithe is a tenth. That is not specifically commanded. And yet we do have a principle. Yeah. Yeah, because Abel gave the very best of his flock. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Giving the best, not giving the leftovers. That's right. We follow Old Testament examples of obedience, don't we? Maybe not the specifics of what they did, but the principles remain. Romans chapter 15, verse 4, 1 Corinthians chapter 10 talks about going back to these things that were written aforetime. that they were written for our learning, for our admonition, for our encouragement. Jesus quoted from the Old Testament in teaching that we are to worship God. In Matthew chapter 4, as he was tempted, you are to worship God and God alone. He added the word only to give the correct interpretation to that passage of Deuteronomy chapter 6. Paul used Old Testament rules as precedents to justify his financial support as a preacher. However, we may not biblically bind on saints any Old Testament commands that are not set forth in the New Testament as being presently applicable. It should be observed that Abraham gave 10% during the patriarchal age. 10% was commanded of the Jews under the Mosaic age. We live under a better covenant. Should we do anything less than what they did? The acceptable basement of our giving seems to be $1 out of every 10 that we make. Now, we're not going to dig into your bank accounts and look and say, look, are you giving? You're not giving 10%. You need to. That's not our job. It is for you to purpose in your heart. It is for you to lay by in store as you have prospered. It is not the job of the preacher, the elders, the treasurer, or anybody else to demand that you give a certain amount. We see the principle in the Old Testament of 10%. We live under a better covenant than the Old Testament. That seems to be that should be the minimum. Better.
What did they do with their tithing in those days? The Old Testament.
The Old Testament
It
was used to support the Levitical priests.
Okay.
They were, because the Levitical priests did not have any kind of a land inheritance, so they had to be supported by their brethren.
So today, we don't call it tithing, we call it giving it.
Yes.
Purpose. So this supports our
It supports the work of the church today.
And preacher and so forth.
Yes.
And so on, right?
Yes. It supports the work of the church. It helps to pay the bills to keep the air conditioning on,
Yeah.
which in Florida we need.
Yeah. But some people today,
Exactly.
some denominations still call it tithing.
Yes, the word is still used, even though it's not commanded for the New Testament. That specific amount is not commanded. Right. Yes.
This word tithing, I hear many times people in the church will say, well, I need to make sure I set aside enough for my tithe.
Yeah.
I tithe every Sunday. No, you don't.
Right.
That's an Old Testament term.
Yes.
Nailed to the cross. You may use that as a guide, but
Yes.
it's 2 Corinthians 9:7 says we give as we purpose.
Exactly. It's a personal decision to look at how much God has blessed you and how much you can support the work of the church today.
It's not our job to say, you don't give 10%, you're not going to heaven.
Right.
You just need to be clear about it.
Right. It is a personal decision. You have to work it out for yourself. We're not going to get into your bank accounts, like I said, and say, look, you need to give more. You're not going to heaven if you don't give more. That's between you and your God. Yes.
As far as the way that I see it, the main reason why tithing is not mentioned in the New Testament and the New Covenant is the New Covenant is based on heart. It's based on, the old law was based on physical, what you could do. It was an example of what was to come. And the reason why it wasn't their own laws based upon what was, required in the law. And there was no way to keep the law to begin with.
Yeah.
And so the idea, I say it all the time, it's he wants your heart. He wants you to do what you do for him because you want to do it. However that may be. Whatever. There's no, what you're commanded to do if you want salvation, is to, and be baptized, remission of sin, believe, all of that. But past that, anything that you do, it's an individual.
Yeah, it is very individual because we cannot bind on someone else what we think is right. I will say this, though, and then we'll get to Shirley. God never allows us to do or give less than we can. If you are not doing what you can, read Matthew 25 in the parable of the talents. You have to do what you can do. Yes? Right. Yeah.
And we have the same regards to giving as they did. The idea is you need to give.
Yes.
Just like they needed to give. So it's the same thing, setting up a structure for them to come out of slavery as the church being established today.
Yeah. And it could be that, I don't know. I'm not going to go there because it's too much opinion and not enough Bible for me to say what I want to say. But God does not expect you to do more than you can do. He never expects you to do more than you can do. But He does expect you to do what you can. So, any other comments there? Marcy?
I think also on what David said, we're to give joyfully.
Yes.
We're to give from the heart.
Right.
I don't think God is really caring about how much per se
Yeah.
we're giving, but if we're giving it to, if we're giving it in a joyful manner and we're not, oh man, I have to give this, then that's what He's wanting. He's wanting us, just like the lady, they all of her, all of hers. She
Yeah.
gave it joyfully, knowing she wasn't going to have anything else.
Yeah.
To help.
The question shouldn't be how much do I have to give. The question should be how much am I able to give. When we look again at the Old Testament examples, they were commanded to stop giving at certain times because you brought too much. We can't use everything you've given. And so we need to look at it from a different point of view. How much am I able to do for God? And not how much do I have to do. Never look at the minimum. Look at how much you are able to extend yourself for Him, financially or physically, work-wise. What can you do for God? So, all right, Thomas.
There was a great famine in that land, and there was much need there.
Yes.
We look back on what they gave, and they gave according to the needs that there was. And we look in our country today, and we see that it's very prosperous.
There are many who are spiritually famished. And we need to do whatever we can to help those and to support the education, spiritual education of the folks around us. All right, question number 4. What does the priesthood of the Old Covenant teach us about the silence of the Scriptures?
Proverbs 17:28 reminds us, even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he is deep intelligent. That's right. Was the word that was put out. Lord, grant us wisdom to know when to speak and when to remain silent. Help us to be quick to listen, slow to speak. The silence of the Scripture is very important. And that's when we get into trouble. We try to revive the silence of the Scripture and say it's something that it doesn't need to speak of.
Right. Is the silence of the Scriptures, is it prohibitive or is it permissive? If God doesn't say anything about it, that means we can do whatever we want, right? No. If God does not command us something, we shouldn't do it. Any other comments? Yeah.
There's many things in the Scriptures which we'd like to know more about. I've got like what's going across side of it. We don't know.
Yeah.
But 2 Timothy 3:16 tells us that God gives us everything that we need. All Scripture is given by inspiration of God. Profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness. The man of God may be complete, thoroughly equipped, ready to do work. We have everything we need to know.
Right. The Scriptures make us complete. We shouldn't worry so much about what the Bible doesn't say and focus on what it does say. If God does not say, don't do this, that doesn't make it permissible. Does He have to give us a list of everything that He forbids? Or is a positive command enough to exclude everything else? What's the point of chapter 7, verses 12 through 14? Since God specified the tribe, no one of an unauthorized tribe was authorized to serve or approved to serve as a priest. We need to be silent where the Bible is silent. The principle of silence, the rule of non-authority, fills God's word. It was wrong for the Judaizers of the first century to require Gentile Christians to be circumcised because the apostles had given no instruction for such a teaching in Acts chapter 15, verse 24, that letter that they sent. Apostolic silence was enough to forbid the binding of it. Consider the following application of this text. Noah was told to build the ark of gopher wood. There was no other type of wood authorized. Noah was to build the ark of that specific type of wood, and he dared not use any other. We must follow the same process in determining Bible authority today. If God had used the generic term wood, Noah could have used oak or elm or cedar or whatever else he wanted to. Some object to this line of reasoning, but this is the very kind that the author of Hebrews used in talking about the priesthood. The principle of respect for God's silence still applies today. Had the New Testament presented a command or an example with the words, they had music in the church, we could have any kind of music we desire. However, the 9 New Testament passages regarding music and worship mention only singing. This only authorizes our music to be a cappella. That is a word from an Italian term which literally means in the style of the chapel. We are to make melody to God using the instrument that He has created, that is the heart. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 19. Silence of the Scriptures is powerful. We need to respect His silence, obey what He has commanded, and not worry about adding to it or taking away from it. Any other? Rob?
I've heard it said, God specifically tells us what He wants.
Yeah.
Which in and of itself eliminates everything.
Should it? It should. To some it doesn't, but it should.
Our answers are always there.
Yeah, the answers are in the Scriptures. We just need to dig for it sometimes. But, think back to your childhood. If your mom sent you to the store to pick up a gallon of milk, she gave you the money to do it. She gave you the ability to obey her command, and you came back with milk and a candy bar. You went beyond what she said, right? She's not going to be happy. We have to do exactly what we are told. Even if you bought the candy bar for her, she didn't ask for it. We do what we are told. And that's where we get into trouble. I just think that God is going to love There's the problem. You think. Instead of reading what He has said. Opinions. Yes, we all have opinions. Right? We all have opinions. But what God's Word says has to be the final word on the subject. All right. Last question. Observe the aspects of Christ that make His high priesthood superior to Aaron's and to Melchizedek's.
Christ desires mediator between us and God, which brings us near to God. The Levitical priesthood kept the people at a distance, that people didn't see them make the sacrifice, so to speak.
Right.
Christ could forgive sins, because the Levitical priest could not. Christ is perfect, but the Levitical priest was not. And Hebrews 7:26 sums it all up.
Yeah.
Christ is holy, harmless, undefiled, separate from sinners, and higher than heaven.
Right. Yeah, verse 26 is basically the summary of what makes Him better. We've got, He is holy. This word describes a man who faithfully and meticulously does his duty to God. An Old Testament priest was required to be holy because only holy persons could enter the temple. Jesus was untainted by sin, and we must be today as well. We are priests in His church, are we not? All Christians are priests. He was called holy at His birth, Luke chapter 1, verse 35, and after His death, resurrection and ascension, Acts chapter 4 and verse 30. The text in verse 26 says that He was harmless. Some versions use the word innocent. Jesus demonstrated a life free from malice or hate. He was kind, benevolent to all. He did only what was good. Acts chapter 10, verse 38 says that Jesus went about doing good and healing those who were oppressed by the devil, for God was with Him. He was undefiled, separate from sinners. There's no moral impurity in Him. When they called for His crucifixion, Pilate asked the question, why? What evil has He done? Pilate's wife said, have nothing to do with this just man. And even Judas said in remorse, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. No accusation of evil can be made against the one who endured temptation yet without sin. separate from sinners while at the same time remaining identified with his brothers, Hebrews chapter 2, verses 11 through 18. He is close to us, but he is far from the evil of this world. He freely fraternized with all sorts of people while on the earth, but he remains separate from the way of life that is pictured as darkness. He's become higher than the heavens. He's higher than the inhabitants of heaven, the angels. This is naturally true because all are subject to him. His exaltation includes his resurrection and ascension and glorification. Other priests were required to make those daily sacrifices. His once-for-all offering of himself was sufficient, since he has been perfected forever. Any other comments or questions? Hebrews chapter 7. Okay. Next week, Hebrews 8. If you did not get a paper, they are up here on the front pew. Thank you for your attention and participation this morning.